As attorneys, we have a duty to zealously represent our clients on matters. Some of those matters are done most effectively and efficiently through the use of AI. So
Yeah.
if you don't use AI, are you not
Wow.
being as professionally
Wow.
responsible as you should to
Yeah.
zealously represent your client?
Yeah.
I know that there's other ethical considerations to consider
I,
with
we'll
that.
we'll talk about those in just a minute. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Spotdraft's Beacon Voices podcast. I am your host, Akshay Verma. I am the Chief Operating Officer at the company. Really excited to have a conversation with my friend Oyango Snell, who is now the president and CEO of a little organization that you may have heard of in the legal profession called CLOC. Oyango, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Akshay. Great to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to talk a little bit about your early journey. I think you're newer into our profession and into our ecosystem. I'm a big fan of people with other perspectives coming in and helping us grow, and so we'll talk a little bit about that today. But as I was once taught, and I think is always kind of fun, I'd love to start at the beginning with you. I have my own story around like why law school and what really drew me to the law and to the profession, but I'd love for our listeners to hear a little bit about that from you, particularly given the prominent role that you have now. So tell us a little bit about the early life of Oyango Snell, and then maybe talk a little bit about why the law was really attractive to you.
Yeah, when you said in the beginning, my mind went back to the book of Genesis or something. I remember being younger and someone say in the beginning. Um, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so this is relevant because of my law school journey and my journey to the practice. We grew up in a very, let's just say, low economic community where mostly people of color, mostly African Americans on the south side in the project housing or housing projects, however you choose to hear the term. But it was tough for us, and throughout all of that, my mom was a young mom. She graduated from she didn't gra- she graduated from eighth grade, and then immediately into high school had my brother. So she was a high school dropout and raised
Wow.
gave birth and raised three kids. But
Wow.
despite that, I saw her get a spark from the Operation Push movement by the late great Jesse Jackson, by Harold Washington, who became the first African American mayor of the city of Chicago. I saw her get involved in community related activities. And it began to dawn on me that there was something bigger and better than our current circumstances. So for me, wanting to and aspiring to be an attorney came from somewhat of the reality of how law can make a difference in people's lives. Harold Washington, who was one of my idols, being the first Black mayor of Chicago, was an attorney, was a state representative, a legislator rather, a lawmaker, and I had a chance to kind of see that and see the impact that it had on the community. Now, the flip side to that is I watched a lot of Perry Mason growing up and LA Law and the practice and Boston Legal and all of the firm, and the list goes on and on and on as far as TV shows and movies that caught my attention as a young buck that made me say, I want to do that. I want to be that guy. I want to be the one that comes in and save the day and drops the evidence on the table and say, aha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Bet you didn't know I can do that. So that was kind of my early childhood opening into the law. What changed for me is I was in the sixth grade. My library teacher put me in charge of the sixth grade debate team because she needed something to do with me. I was always in trouble, and I had to advocate for the philosophy of Marcus Garvey, which is taking all African people back to Africa, or African descendants rather, back to Africa, versus the Booker T. Washington kind of theory or philosophy, which was learning a trade, getting industrial jobs, and really making a stake here in America from a business perspective.
Yeah.
That experience kind of gave me the advocacy chops. We lost. The sixth graders lost to the eighth graders. We lost, but it was that process that I went through, and my library teacher, Greta Chamberlain, who told me that I could be an attorney, I can be a lawyer. So it was that first person that actually planted the seed for me. As far as law school is concerned, I loved it. I am one of those kind of law school nerds
I
that
love it.
that actually fell into it. I didn't go straight to law school. In fact, I got rejected by about 12 law schools, including the law school that I graduated from, the Ohio State University.
Yeah.
I got rejected from everywhere I wanted to go. I waitlisted and I got into one law school, I believe. I think well, not I think I know my LSAT score was not as high enough to get
Yeah.
into some of those institutions. So I started. I worked for a while, got my MBA, and then I started law school at night in a part-time program at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. Did exceptionally well after my first year. Wanted to transfer full-time into Capital, but it was very expensive. So I reached out to some of the contacts that I had at Ohio State, asked them would I be a good candidate for transferring, and they said something like, "If I were you, I would get my materials in by this date." So they didn't say yes, they didn't say no, but they said, "If I were you, I would get my materials in by this date." I got my materials in, and voila, I got in to the Ohio State University, which is
Yeah.
my alma mater. So they didn't let me in through the front door, so I
Yeah.
came in through the back door.
Or you just make a door and you find your way
Or you
in there.
just make it.
That's
Kind
the
of
way
like
you gotta
legal
do
ops,
it.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% true. 100% true. What was Ohio State like? I mean, massive school, massive school. Um, so much success, obviously, on everyone. If you watch sports, Ohio State is near the top of the list in terms of schools that people in this country know about. But what was the experience like? And I have to ask this question because I have read Hillbilly Elegy. I have read the book, and as you know, JD Vance attended Ohio State as an
It did.
undergrad
It
after
did.
after he served,
It did.
and he went to law school somewhere else. But a lot of his story was around the scale of that school and what that meant. Like, what was it like for you?
For me, it was nostalgic. I'll tell you why. One, it was the Ohio State University, right? The pinnacle of the Big Ten. Coming
Yeah,
from the Midwest, a Chicago kid, and getting a chance to be at this storied institution, it was kind of mentally overwhelming or emotionally overwhelming when I first stepped foot on campus. The reason why it wasn't as daunting as I think it could have been is because when I was in undergrad at Central State University, which is a historically Black college, I played football. And we would play in this classic called the Capital City Classic every year during my time there. So I got the opportunity to play inside the horseshoe. And
wow.
I tell you, man, when we stepped into the horseshoe, I felt like Maximus on
Yeah,
Gladiator. You're just standing in the middle looking around like, are you not entertained? This is
yeah,
about to go down. So I had that experience of being on campus before I got there as an adult and getting ready to go to law school. So all of the butterflies or jitterbugs, I kind of shake. It was shook loose, but it was still nostalgic in the sense of I'm now here. The goal that I sought to achieve back in undergrad when they rejected me because they didn't think that I had the chops or had the grades or the GPA or the LSAT. I made it. I'm
yeah.
here. So
There.
I was battling that too at the same time being on this story franchise. So it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah. And what was it like being in law school? I mean, there's so many different perspectives. I'm a lot like you. I enjoyed and I feel like I took advantage of everything that law school had to offer outside of class, trial team, moot courts. Like those were the things that really gave me a lot of energy during law school. Like, was that part of your experience at Ohio State as well?
I didn't do any of that. So
Yeah.
law review, moot court, mock trial, I didn't do any of it. But here's why. Because I started in a part-time program at one university, when I transferred to Ohio State, I was immediately thrusted into the on-campus interviewing process.
Gotcha.
And through that, because I was in the top of the class
Yeah.
leaving Capital University, I
Yeah.
was in search of my job because now I just cut my entire law school education career by 1 year. So I now
Yeah.
have to hustle because I'm also behind on hours. I didn't take crim law yet. I hadn't even
Ah,
taken civil procedure yet. So I was in the process of trying to land my job, my summer job. And I was thrusted into the on campus interviewing process. And then I got my job and they invited me back for the second summer after that summer. So I was slotted to try to write on the law review and do some of those other things. And I said, why? I got my
yeah.
job already. I don't
Yeah.
need to do any of this stuff. So from that point on, it was just coasting and having a great time. I got a
Yeah.
chance to pick the classes that I wanted to take. I wasn't under a lot of pressure. It was
Yeah.
smooth sailing for me.
Well, now I'm jealous because I was scrambling for a job until April before graduation. So, literally, like 5 weeks before I graduated law school is when I landed my job. And I tell you, I was on my way to campus. I'd moved back home for my last year to save some money. I'm on my
Yeah,
way to campus. I had interviewed with Pillsbury like a month before, and I hadn't heard back. And I got a voicemail. Somehow the call hadn't come through. I got a voicemail from the partner. He was like, "Hey, I'm really sorry. We had changes in our recruiting team. Forgot to get an offer out to you." I
yeah,
literally was screaming my head off the entire rest of the drive to law school because you know how much it means to
yes,
get that
absolutely.
job. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it is such a powerful feeling because
yeah,
a I was racking up debt. Like my
yeah.
parents were not
No
paying for law
question.
school. I didn't have the money, so hey, we were doing loans. It was a
Same
big
here.
deal, and so
Same
I
here.
remember that. I appreciate that experience very, very much. So, all right, so you got the job. You're
That
getting
job.
out of law school. How are you feeling? What are you thinking about being a lawyer? What does that first job look like for you?
So at the law firm life, it was good for me because number one, I'm 30, so I'm an old man as a lawyer. I'm 30
Yep.
years old
Yep.
compared to the rest of my cohort.
Same.
Uh,
Yep.
so that's one factor. The second factor is I went in with my eyes wide open. I thought, but I knew I didn't want to be a partner. I thought I did, but I knew I didn't at the same time. So because of that, I went in with the opportunity to make the biggest splash and biggest name for myself. So my first year was a learning experience. I remember writing the memos and getting them back with nothing but red ink on them, telling them how horrible I was, how the heck did I ever go to law school, and my writing sucked, and I'd never be anything worth a damn in the legal profession. I
Yeah.
remember all of this.
Yeah.
So but iron sharpens iron, as they say. And I went on to learn a lot from a few partners and really do some good work. Most of my practice was on government relations and public policy. I had association clients, which primarily kind of catapulted my career into the association executive space,
Yep.
vis-a-vis fast forwarding
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
now, but won't
Yeah.
jump the gun. And all of that experience really was the groundwork that I needed in order to be not only a successful attorney, because I represented some very heavy hitters on the insurance side, construction side, and energy industries. That helped me kind of get really a good core foundation into the practice of law from a law firm environment. So I think that was really, really key for me. But I went on to use my law background and not necessarily practice directly. I left there and went to the state of Ohio government representing public utility consumers. I left there and I got involved in politics and launched a campaign for the state senate in Columbus, Ohio, and lost in a primary election. Hung out with the Secretary of State as the elections counsel before moving on to DC and lobbying for a national trade association on the property casualty insurance side. So I've always been leveraging my legal background
Yep.
and law degree and business, so to speak, in public policy and advocacy. And it's just been a significant kind of background and dynamic to have as far as what we do today.
Yeah. Most of my guests on this podcast are in businesses, they run companies, they are lawyers on the in house side. There's been a really nice trend in our profession, and I still teach at Santa Clara, my alma mater. There's been a really nice trend in the last 5 years for these law grads to look out there post graduation and see all this variety of opportunity that's out there that was not available to me. It was, law firm, maybe government, but even that was not
Yeah,
really a thing straight out of law school. Certainly not
right.
the in house world. That's starting to all change. I
Yeah,
just think it's a wonderful thing for our profession and for the people who are going into it, and many of them listen to this podcast, to know that on the back end of that education are a variety of things for them to consider that they
correct.
may not
Yeah,
necessarily have known about. And I think that's just great for everybody. So I have not had anybody on the podcast who's had that kind of government, trade association, lobbying
yeah,
experience. And it's
yeah,
a good reminder because I live in tech day in and day out now that
yeah.
there are a bunch of other really cool things going on with our profession, and people should recognize that because it might be something very, very interesting for them as well.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
All right. So, law firm life, lobbying. You've been to DC. You played the House of Cards game a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Tell us a little bit. I want to jump into the legal operations at this point. How does this thing about clock for you come about? What's the outreach like? What is it in you that's like, wow, this is actually really interesting and maybe not something I've necessarily delved into before?
Yeah. So I when I left my role as a lobbyist for the insurance industry back in DC, it was to take a role as general counsel for an energy trade association here in California. I served as their general counsel, their first ever general counsel in this 100-year plus storied entity that was an association representing some Fortune 50 and Fortune 100 energy companies. So just to paint that picture for you, and through this association, my primary committee or primary bosses outside of my CEO was the legal committee of these companies. So it included their in house counsels, general
Yeah,
counsels in some sense. So I'm the general counsel for the trade association. And I'm working with this committee of lawyers, all in house counsels, but a few general counsels as well. And I find myself trying to learn how to be a general counsel, some from them,
yeah,
but also how to be part of the strategic element and core productivity of what we were trying to do as an organization. So I had to think about it as I was trying to build up this legal team. I was also trying to build out how do we how do we be part of the bottom line? How do we help strategically move the business of the association and these various companies forward? And I found myself at ACC's annual meeting in 2018 back in DC, and I stumbled into a panel, and I thought the panel was going to be about helping general counsels learn how to operationalize their program. You know, build
yeah,
a program from the ground up. I don't remember the title, but I rolled into it, and they're throwing up dashboards and talking about strategies, and I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? This isn't lawyering. This isn't building out a team. This has
yeah,
nothing to do with in-house work. And I leaned into it. I went back to my organization in California. I told my boss, I said, hey, I think I want to create a position called legal operations coordinator. And to put this in perspective, this is 2018.
yeah,
I'm in Sacramento. CLOC is
yeah,
right down the street from 2015 to 2018 at this point, and I never even knew it.
yeah. That's
So
crazy.
I create this position. We're off and running. We use Monday software as our dashboards, and we're creating metrics. And we have this little text chain. And Monday, that with the team, I build up a team. I hire an attorney. I hire this legal ops coordinator. We got an admin. Together, we are thriving as a legal team. We create some proactive strategies with amicus curiae briefs by going out and actively trying to find somewhere to file a brief at. We're just
Wow.
slamming. So we're doing all these efficiency and effectiveness types of components, trying to downsource what's going out and figuring out what me and the attorney can do in-house and what we needed to still push out to the Lathams and the Pillsburys and the Oryx and those folks of the world versus what we could keep in-house and actually practice lawyering, me and my
Yeah,
other colleague be
yeah,
lawyers. So we went through that process, and that legal committee was praising us for it. I mean, we were really helping push the advocacy bottom line of what our companies wanted to see from the association. And the legal team was no longer just the department of no.
mm,
No, we can't do this for antitrust purposes. No, we can't do this because of confidentiality issues. No, we can't do this for conflict of interest issues. Like, okay, how can we do this? How can I work with you as your counsel? How can we operationalize this in a way to be efficient, be effective, get to the result that you're trying to achieve? And still move the ball forward. It might not look like you thought it was going to look, but how do we be a department of how do we get it done versus no, we can't get it done? And that was the process that we went through there. Fast forward a couple of years, I left that organization and became the chief executive officer of the California Lawyers Association, which is the voluntary state bar. And I met the dean of the law school at McGeorge there in Sacramento, and he was recruiting me very heavily to come and teach. When I stepped down from my role as CEO at the California Lawyers Association, I went to teach law at McGeorge. I ran our academic success program and sort of our skills writing component. And about a year later, when I was looking at becoming, or at least trying to take that route to being a tenured professor,
yeah,
someone from CLOC dipped into my LinkedIn email and DM and said, hey, would you consider this organization
yeah.
as the executive director at that time?
Okay.
And I looked at it, and I went online and I looked at all of the past CGI videos, and I didn't know what I was looking at that time. But I knew they was having a fun conference, and
Yeah,
it was educational, and people were making their pitches and their speeches, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So at first I'm like, this is cool, and then it hit me. This is the stuff that I was dealing with in 2018. This is what they have done. why did I not find this
Yeah.
organization then?
What a
And I
great
think because of
question,
the
eh?
name. It was
Yeah.
because of the name.
Okay.
Consortium and association, the algorithms and the SEO engines were not up
Oh,
to speed to
interesting.
like really capture it as the premier trade association for legal ops
Got it.
professionals in the industry. So I never found them until they found me through LinkedIn when they had a national search looking for a position for someone to serve as executive director. So I fell in love with the people, the board that was during the interview process. They were honest about where CLOC stood as an organization. That even though it was in its 10-year history, it still had some infancy on governance, on staffing, on programming. There was so much for us to be able to do, and that was what was attracted to me. To get to the heart of your question,
Yeah.
that part I thought that is where my skill sets of being a change agent, being a transformational leader who just happens to have this lawyer and public policy and advocacy and business background, I get to bundle all those experiences with less on the government affairs side of advocacy, but more on advocacy of the profession, advocacy of the individuals, and take that and ball it up and put it into this framework that we're now operationalized through CLOC. And that was the attractive point for me. That was the this is it. Like I feel it, I see it, I can see where the future is going with this organization. If I am able to get in and work with the board and work with the team, help the team to develop to get to where we need to get to.
What about legal ops do you think is so interesting to lawyers like you and me? And like I left the practice of law entirely and I kind of stumbled into this. But what do you think it is about it? It's not something I don't have a standard or kind of a holistic answer to that question, but I keep asking myself that. I have my answer for
Yeah,
myself, but it's such a personal
yeah.
response to that. Do you think there's anything out there with respect to your mentality and your thought process and like why does this role in this profession speak so much to lawyers who kind of want to leave the practice or add this into their repertoire?
Think because it gives us an opportunity. Look, we always criticize lawyers for not having a good business mindset,
Yeah.
right? That was probably one of the reasons why I went to get an MBA because I wanted to understand the business language. I didn't want to enter into the world of business. I just wanted to understand it. I wanted to be able to leverage it. I think legal operations, because it's a multiple disciplinary practice, so to speak, um, I think it gives lawyers the opportunity to exercise that business mindset through operations, right? I think it gives us the opportunity to look at the practice differently in a way of just actually winning and losing a matter
Yeah.
or getting a deal done or not getting the deal done. It looks at how we impact the bottom line of an organization, of the entire enterprise, not
Yeah.
just our department, not just one case, not just one deal, but the entire organization. And we didn't go to school to do that.
No, we
We
did
went to
not.
school to win the case, to win the matter, to do the
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
And now, through our ability of analysis and evaluation and operations, we get an opportunity to look at how do we have a significant impact into the entire organization and where the organization's moving. And I think that gives us also an opportunity to leverage up or level up rather within the organizations that we're in.
Yeah.
Some of us are general counsels, but not in the C suite, so to speak,
Yep.
right? So it gives us another notch on our belts to be able to ascend to from a professional development perspective. But
Yeah.
I think just having that ability to have more of a broader impact on the organization, one, two, being able to exercise that business mindset that we're criticized for not having.
Yeah.
And then three, doing it in a way where you're enhancing the effectiveness and as well as the efficiencies in getting things done. I think that just becomes more of an attractive point for lawyers that kind of lean into it.
I think that's a great point, and part of for me, part of the foundation of this reality of not having the business lexicon, of not having some of these foundational business pillars on how you run a business and how you grow a business. Look, we didn't learn about data in law school. We didn't learn about technology in law school. We didn't learn about process or efficiency or P&L or spreadsheets or economic. We didn't learn those things. So it's difficult to be an in-house counsel, be a GC where you are a key component of how the enterprise will succeed, yet you are not raised with the same language that the rest of the business is. And so
100%.
to me, legal operations bridge that gap, right? It
Absolutely.
bridges that gap, and you get to be that bridge builder to help enable that. I do think what we've seen in the last, I don't know, 10 years, but certainly much more in the last 5 years, is in-house lawyers, and many of our customers are in this role now, table stakes now for them to be more operationally minded, for them to have to leverage technology and create efficiency and so forth. So
Yeah, I see that. I'll say this one tidbit.
yeah, go for
Okay,
it.
I believe that's where professionals who did not go to law school actually have a leg up over on attorneys,
I
right?
have been yelled at on LinkedIn for saying that, by the way. But yes, I 100% agree. It's not a knock, it's just a reality.
No, it's a reality because they have conducted the actual education, the business and understand the business language, and they know how to pierce through. And it's so unfortunate sometimes in our profession, legal ops professionals who didn't go to law school and become attorneys, they kind of shrink themselves. Unfortunately, to attorneys, and they have so much more experience sometimes than the attorneys do in getting
Absolutely
things
right.
done, especially from a business mindset and legal operations. And I think there's so much more of a story to be told and how to elevate those individuals in order to help this industry grow, thrive, and prosper.
Yeah. So if you were to, and this, I love this part of the conversation, because if you were to go back and say, I would change law school so that these things are added in and these things are removed, so that the law grads come out with much more of a business sense, what are some things that you would add in there?
Yeah, so these are some of the things that I've been trying to do now with some of the courses that I'm still teaching as an adjunct professor
Yeah.
at McGeorge. I teach a class called the legal profession, and it's really to get 1Ls geared up for the profession and helps them along their journey in developing what they want to be when they grow up, for lack of a better term. I get to have
Yeah.
influence into what that looks like for those that decide to listen to me. I'm pretty sure some of them
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
might have a mom or a dad or an uncle who was a lawyer or a mentor, and they're like, whatever, I'm going this route. I'm entering into this practice, and I'm going to do this. But for the few that decide to listen to me, I get to now influence them on this whole new big world and
Yeah.
leaning into tech and understanding that AI and technology is not going to replace lawyers. It's going to limit the amount or the number of lawyers that enter into the profession that don't know how to leverage and use AI. you know, and that I
100%.
truly do stand by and believe. So I think in answering your question or like really just having a discussion on this, I think is going to look like, or what it could look like rather, is some type of technological educational component that's geared towards legal ops at the law school level, if not even before that, but definitely at the law school level, so that people can understand how these tools are leveraged and used to advance the business and practice of law. In fact, I've been on record over the last couple of weeks. I've been at a lot of conferences with the Legal Market Association, with the Association of Legal Administrators. And one of the things that I've been saying about when it comes to AI and lawyering is, or at least asking the question, whether or not there is a professional responsibility of lawyers to actually use AI to the fullest.
Mm,
As attorneys, we have a duty to zealously represent our clients on matters. Some of those matters are done most effectively and efficiently through the use of AI. So
yeah.
if you don't use AI, are you not
Wow.
being as professionally
Wow.
responsible as you should to
Yeah.
zealously represent your client?
Yeah.
I know that there's other ethical considerations to consider with
We'll
that,
talk about those in just a minute, because I think this is
but
this is an interesting take that I have not heard yet, and it raises a lot of, like, in the corporate world, probably less of an issue, but there are a lot of access to justice issues that can be
indeed.
addressed
That's where
leveraging
I'm headed.
AI.
That's
Yeah.
where I'm headed. That's where I'm headed. So I think that there is a lot of opportunities for us to, particularly at the law school education level, to change the way a bit. The Socratic method, fine, great, do it. Shows you how to think on your feet. All right, awesome, great. The writing aspect, the research and writing, yeah. Learning how to cite cases and understanding where they come from and how to shepherdize them and how to sync them. Yeah, great. LexisNexis, Westlaw, Thomas Ware, all of those have tools that you can learn how to do that. Learn how the tools work. Learn the basics, the fundamentals. It's just like we had to learn the Dewey Decimal System, with libraries. But at some point, you got to graduate to the
Yeah.
technology aspect of it and how the Dewey Decimal System has been replaced. So understand it in case all the lights go out in the power and you still got to find the book.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, how the technology has enhanced that sort of scope of work to where you can get it done much, much faster, much, much quicker. And also, by the way, you can summarize the entire volume of books in the next 5 minutes, but you have to have the human element of evaluating, analyzing it, and making the connection.
And putting your judgment on it, because that's not going
100%.
away anytime soon. No, it's
100%.
just the thing that I alluded to, I'm sure the Sullivan and Cromwell apology letter has gone viral. I don't know if you've seen it yet. Um,
I
that
have
is that
not
is
actually. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Well, I will just tell you real quick that a partner at Sullivan and Cromwell had to write an apology letter to a magistrate judge on an $8 billion bankruptcy matter,
that does not
where
feel good, sound good.
where filings that were made to the court were
Yeah,
later, to their credit, that
yeah,
evening. So filings were filed in the afternoon. That evening, it was caught that a number of the citations in the brief were hallucinations. Now, they didn't name the tool or anything, and you know what? That doesn't matter. It
it
doesn't
doesn't
matter
matter.
what tool they
Doesn't matter
used,
what tool it
and
is.
it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. What matters is that the governance mechanisms did not work,
yeah,
and they owned up to it. And all, but it did call into question the ethical obligation, which is almost the flip of what you had mentioned.
yeah,
The ethical obligation, if you are going to use AI, to make sure that you are validating the output. Now, I live in that world with contracting all the time. This is a submission to court. They owned up to it. It calls into question, and the thing that I hate is the narrative that gets somewhat more cemented in our profession, which is that technology ruins things. Technology is not good. We're going to be better. That is just not true.
no,
And when you're
yeah,
learning a
yeah,
new piece of
yeah,
technology, you're going to stumble out of the blocks. It's
yeah,
okay. Yeah. So
yeah.
that was the other ethical piece of this that has really been front and center in the last few days.
I liken where we are in this time frame with technology to the same concept or construct as to where a paralegal or a junior associate can do the research, write the brief, and it's up to the supervising partner to review that and make sure the paralegal and the junior associate haven't screwed the pooch on
Yep.
citations,
Absolutely.
on the arguments that's being filed before a judicial before the judiciary. So I liken that to the same across the board. Before attorneys file anything, they have a responsibility to review it and fact check it into the citations, the all of the things. Now, if you use a tool to help you do that, you better you better know that that tool is going to give you what you need before you hit the send button to the court or run off and file it with the court directly in person. Which I think some people just do that for the ceremony of doing it. But at the end of the day, you have to use that human judgment to make sure it is what it should be. Did you remember the good old saying, "Res ipsa loquitur"? The thing speaks for
Absolutely.
itself. It does not speak for itself. You have to speak for it and
Yeah.
validate that the
Yeah.
things in there are what they're supposed to be,
Yeah.
not what some tool cranked it out and said that it is.
Yeah. And to the partner's credit in this letter, I think it was a he. I'm not sure. The letter was very clear. Here are governance mechanisms before somebody gets to use AI at the firm. Here
Yeah,
are governance mechanisms for when something with AI output goes out, and like we drop the ball here,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So to
yeah.
me, that's not about the technology; it's about the process,
It's
and it
about the
kind of gets us
process.
back.
It's about the
That's
process.
why it
Yeah.
really gets us back to legal operations. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I think you've been in the seat for about a year, and I want to talk a little about
Two
your
years now.
visibility
Yeah,
working
almost
2 years. Sorry,
18 months.
it's
18 months. Yeah,
2026. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but to really get a sense for where you think the profession is going in this new age. I guess
yeah.
it's not a new age of AI anymore. It is the
No,
age of AI.
it's the
Where
age.
you think the profession is going, how you think it orchestrates things across legal departments and functions and so forth. Would love to get your take on the future of our profession.
I think this is a very pinnacle season for legal ops professionals. Whether you're in-house legal ops professional at a law firm or even a legal tech vendor, I think this is a very important time that we find ourselves in. I think the entire legal ecosystem that is comprised of legal operations really sits at the epicenter of where we are headed into the future. Legal ops professionals, particularly, are sort of the bridge in understanding the technology and then having the ability to communicate it to in-house legal teams and lawyers and GCs and chief legal officers, as well as outside law firms, whether it's law firm vendor management, whether it's contract lifecycle management, whether it's your professional development training internally. Legal ops professionals have their hand on the pulse on all of these components, and they can sit at many different tables. I came on board and I was hearing how legal ops is at a inflection point. And I bought into that. I drank that Kool-Aid and I was
Yeah.
saying it too. I was like, yes, we're at an inflection point. Anytime I wanted to sound important, as the chief executive of the industry, of the legal ops industry, right? It's like, yes, legal ops is at an inflection point. No, we're not. I think we're at a transformational point. I think we've surpassed this sort of inflection point of which direction we're going. We're always going to go through change. We're always going to be transforming. But I think we're, to your point that you started off with in your question, we're no longer wondering, is AI a real thing or is people going to be using it? We're at the point of how do you execute it? How do you
Yeah.
execute it effectively? And how
Yeah.
do you make it get the outcomes that you desire to have in order to move your business forward? And
Yeah.
legal ops pros sit at the very center of pushing the buttons and operationalize that entire program. Also, they have the opportunity to do it at the highest strategic levels within
Yeah.
the organization, at which many years ago that wasn't the
No.
case,
No.
right? So from being at the center of it all, understanding the language, having the expertise, knowing who the vendors are,
Yeah.
understanding the technology, understanding how the legal processes work internally, being able to be the go-to in between those, communicate to IT, communicate to lawyers, communicate to the executives at the strategic level to help move the business forward. This is a grand time for us as an industry. So I see more of that happening on a broader scale as we move forward to the future. From my thought process and from my lens, our goal is to help our members and key stakeholders get there through educational opportunities, through best practice sharing, through partnering with vendors like you all to tell the stories, to have the conversations, to think about new tools, new services, new opportunities, and bring the legal ecosystem together so that we can keep charging for and driving transformation into how we do business as well as practice law in throughout the world. I was going to say throughout the United States, but this
Yeah,
is
no,
global.
it's global. It's
Yeah.
absolutely global, and
Yeah.
it's really starting to come up in other parts of the world too. You mentioned something that I want to double click on, which is the education in the profession. One
Yes.
of the things that I think our profession really struggles with is standardization on how to talk about things, how
Yeah.
to execute on things. What does good look like? What does great look like? Right? Lawyers, typically speaking, we go to law school, we get a level of education, we go out to practice, and then whoever it is that's supervising us, they help us hone our skills. But generally speaking, and I'm not saying everybody's writing has to be the same, if you look at three pieces of writing around the same topic that's written by lawyers, you can tell what great is because you speak the same language and the same standard has been hammered into you over a long period of time. Legal operations doesn't have that just yet. And I've certainly met with many GCs who've been quite outspoken at the fact that, like, hey, I've tried out legal operations professionals. It hasn't gone so well. What are your thoughts, particularly because you are so versed in understanding the importance of education in the legal profession and certainly for legal operations? What role do you really want CLOC to play in bringing that to our profession?
Yeah, I think, well, not what role I want us to play. We are going to play the role.
Yeah, yeah,
Before it's all said and done, we're going to play the role. I think standardization is great. And I think that there is something to be said about it. It does require, however, that buy in from the GC and chief legal officer community, right? We can create standards, but if folks don't buy into the standards or they believe the standard should be something different, then I think therein lies the problem of us still going back and forth of what is the standard, right?
yeah,
So I think the role that we play is understanding the entire legal ecosystem by having the diverse representation under the CLOC umbrella. We have members who are on in-house legal teams. We have members who are in law firms. We have members who are who represent the legal tech community. And under my watch and with support from the board and the team, we've been able to somewhat kind of get through some of the previous past year's frustrations and really work together in a more coherent way, which is why we've seen the change with the board of now opening up the board to having that entire demographic represented in our governance, the core governance of our organization and
Yeah.
leadership, which are my bosses, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those were important steps to take to be able to start laying the foundation for being more open to driving sort of standardization from across the board. And now you have people willing from the different components of our entire legal ecosystem, willing and ready to kind of weigh into to what those standards should look like. So I do understand from the chief legal officers and general counsels and folks that you've talked to and folks that you've have heard from talk about, hey, there's a lack of standardization here. But I also use that or think or believe, or my opinion rather, is that some of that sometimes is a scapegoat. Because if you want something to work and you buy into it conceptually, you understand that from a general counsel role or from a chief legal officer perspective, you need to elevate your legal operations program and profession. And it's not something that's othered within the business that you do. It's part of the construct of your business and the
Yeah.
key decisions that you make.
Yeah.
When you do that, when you take that approach, you can't say it doesn't work because
Yeah.
it's based off all the decisions that you make. When
Yeah.
you keep it over here and you throw a couple of dollars at it and hire a person and say, all right, go make it work, well, that's not going to get it done
Fair.
if they
Very
don't have
fair.
the infrastructure set up to have them be successful. So, I look, I can't I don't put myself in the business judgment of any of those GCs. I was
Sure.
one. I had different things to think about when I was GC. The things that we're facing now in this world are totally different than the decision making that I had to make during my almost 5 years as a GC. And I get it. I understand it. But you still have to look at how does it become part of your ecosystem, your infrastructure, not how is it something that's another wing of your department and somebody else is in charge of making it work or not work.
Yeah. It's a great point, and I think one of the biggest drawbacks for success, irrespective of the level of talent that may be in the legal operations seat at any organization, is the level of empowerment and resourcing that you give to that role. So,
100%.
100% on
Yeah.
board with that. I will say, and this is I don't know how prevalent of a narrative this is in our profession, but I do think there is a little bit of a gap between kind of the first and second generation of legal ops leaders and the folks that are kind of starting to come up now. Like, are you kind of in line with that narrative, and if so, like, how do we close that gap for them?
Yeah, 100%. I agree holistically with that narrative. When I came on board in November of 24, we had our first like board meeting, and I had my first senior team meeting in person in Chicago in January. And my first question to them in separate discussions was, who's our primary customer? Who's our
Yeah.
primary client that we serve as an association? And what's their persona? And we came up with different theories and different numbers and different things to kind of throw at. And what we saw is if you look at the 10-year history of CLOC and you go back 10 years ago and you look at how many of those folk that helped create CLOC and that was around CLOC 10 years ago, how many of them are heavily involved in CLOC?
Mm,
And the answer is zero. How many of them are involved in CLOC at an intermediate level? Well, it drops down to a few. And then how many are like, all in guts and glory, or how many are out rather.
yeah.
There's a lot. There's a
Yeah.
lot, right?
Yeah.
So some of them, many of them are the speakers and the trainers now, right? And the question becomes, how are they getting their cups filled from a best practice sharing, from an educational development, professional development aspect? How are they how are they continuing to grow in the profession? And I think that's where you see a lot of the other organizations that are doing great stuff throughout the legal ecosystem, whether it's programs out in Vegas of running legal like a business, whether it's Concero, whether it's Solid, all of these folks are doing great things, and
Yeah.
and that's not to give notable mention or leave anybody out. There are so many other organizations that are doing great things that gives people a little bit more space. I think CLOC also has elevated its offerings and its game in launching our clock academy and bringing it to certain levels and doing deeper dives at a 200 and a 300 level versus versus a 100 level that's totally geared towards, people will day one on a job to about year
Yeah.
six.
Yeah.
Right. So we've seen the turnover, so to speak, over the years. I'd liken, though, that I think and I feel that we're in a process, or at least we find ourselves at the epicenter of bringing it all back together again, but also marching forward with sort of a different mission, so to speak. Yes, the mission is still to transform and enhance the business and practice of law, but
Yeah.
how we do that is what
Yeah.
I'm seeing change.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Look, there has never in the history of legal operations been the number of roles that are open out there
Yeah.
with companies, and that fact alone. And I'm not saying that is the thing to focus on or to hang our hats on, but the fact that that is happening, and the fact that so many of the GCs that I speak with and have met over the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years, many of them, their very first hire when they get a headcount in their legal departments is to go out and find somebody for legal operations. I mean, if
Yeah.
that doesn't speak to the value that many GCs and CLOs are placing on this kind of a function, I don't know what else will. So I think we have to fill those ranks. We have to train those ranks. We have to give them experience and opportunities, help them grow. And CLOC, obviously, taking the laboring oar on the academy, I think, is a great place to do that. Um, Oyango, I would love to talk to you a little bit about the pet project that Susan launched in 2023. Came to me with the idea to tell this story that we have been talking about. I have been a huge fan of documentaries my entire life. I think it is such an incredible way to tell a story. We had no idea when Susan came to me whether anybody would give a shit about this story.
Yeah.
Are they
Yeah.
going to care? Yes, we could show it to legal operations folks and it would be great. And I think they would enjoy it, but we wanted it to be more than that. So that's a lot of the energy and trepidation and angst that we came into this with. And now it's in final stages. You have been so gracious to offer up CLOC as the launch vehicle for that. I am so excited to see the reaction. I don't care what it is; it's going to be great.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited to see that reaction. I'd love to hear from you. What about this project really spoke to you for the profession and for the organization?
Yeah. One, I was so thrilled, humbled, and excited to be part of it and for Clock to be part of it. I think it's important for Clock to be um, um, engaged in any project that tells the history of our profession because I think it's such a pivotal part of it when it comes to legal ops. So, just with those pleasantries out of the way, what it really meant to me is, I'm a student of history. I love history, no
Yeah,
matter the daunting sides of it as well as the great side of it,
yeah,
or the great sides of it. Right. The goal is to understand history sometimes so it doesn't repeat itself. We fail to do that in other ways. We won't bother ourselves with having that discussion today. But in within respects of understanding history, so that you can understand where you're going. That if there was to be one thing or one important factor that I hung my hat on, it is that one. In order to understand where you're going, you have to understand and embrace where you've been, because that tells the storyline and gives you all of the tools that you need to then catapult you forward, regardless of what your vision may be.
yeah,
And I think it's important for others to understand that so the industry can grow. Right, it's not owned by one individual, it's
yeah.
not owned by Clock,
No,
it's owned by the masses of people engaged and involved in it. And that's the beauty of it. You
yeah,
get to hear the authentic storytelling
yeah,
and narratives of the various people that's been involved in the founding and the creation of this industry, as well as this organization that has spawned out to become so many different things. I mentioned a few of those organizations and programs and things that they're doing, all derivative in some way, some fashion from Clock and the various people that got together in a room and decided that we're not only going to commiserate with each other, we're not only going to talk about how horrible our experiences are, we're not only going to talk about how we're overworked, overburdened, underpaid, understaffed. We're going to talk about how do we grow this thing? How do
Yeah.
we get together and not just commiserate, but talk about actionizing and creating what they thought were standards, so to speak, for that time to
Yeah.
grow this into a profession.
Yeah.
And kudos to them for having sort of that vision. They might not have thought that it was going to become what it is today, but they
Yeah.
had a vision,
Yeah.
and they put their action, their sweat equity into it, into making that vision come to fruition. So for that reason, in and of itself, I think it's a very powerful tool to tell the story of this industry. I think to those that look at it outside of legal ops, they see something and say, oh, this is a serious business. This
Yeah.
is not something that somebody just made up
Yeah.
and said, oh, we're going to call it legal operations. That sounds pretty catchy. No, it's something that is
Yeah.
seriously a strategic business decision that you make to help move your legal department and your entire company forward if you buy into it the right way.
100%. And for me, I think I knew that it would resonate with people in our profession. I wasn't worried about that. I think part of my gauge for this will be how do people outside the profession, and that includes GCs and CLOs, by the way,
100%.
people outside the profession respond to this, view it, accept it, recognize it. This profession has had a tremendous amount of meaning for me in somebody who really went to law school to be a lawyer and be an environmental lawyer. And my almost my entire life, something I wanted to do did not find the kind of satisfaction that I was hoping to find in it. And this gave me an entire new path that I've been on for almost 14 years now, and so much success has come out of that and so much satisfaction has come out of that. For me, it was with Susan's idea to be able to look back and be like, wow, look at where this profession is now. And
Yeah.
we are far enough along, 10 plus years with clock, much longer with ancillary parts of the profession kind of coalescing into a function.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see this reaction myself.
Absolutely, indeed. Can't wait for it. And
Cool.
and hey, I think it lays the foundation for the future story to be told.
Absolutely. One of the things Susan and I are tossing around now is like, hey, if this thing is received well, are we doing an update couple of episodes as part of the documentary? Are we telling the next piece of the story? Are we going global with it? It is very much a look back with a little bit of a look forward because, budgets and timings and all of that. But again, if it's received well, I would be up for doing a couple more episodes that they go beyond the scope of what we're already telling.
Well, as I tell my friends and even some of my frenemies, don't threaten me with a good time.
All right. My guest today has been the president and CEO of CLOC, Oyango Snell. Thanks so much for a fantastic conversation, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks a
I'll see
lot,
you in a
man.
couple of weeks at CLOC.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.